Welcome to FoxTales Movie Club. I'm Sebastian Fox.
And I'm Tony Sherman. Each video we take a chosen movie and lead a discussion on our thoughts and opinions.
We'll be getting into the character, plot, and technical achievements with no regard for spoilers.
So if you haven't seen this movie and don't want to hear said spoilers, you have been warned.
Also, stick around to the end to hear the topic for the next video.
Today's movie is Superman. No wait, scratch that. The Iron Giant.
The Iron Giant was a movie released in 1999, directed by Brad Bird, composed by Michael Kamen, and stars Eli Marienthal, Harry Connick Jr., and Vin Diesel.
And looking at, especially Michael Kamen, very interested. I saw in the credits that the orchestra that they used was the Czech Philharmonic Orchestra.
Yes.
Which I thought was a very interesting choice. I'm not sure what all goes into deciding who's going to be playing the music for different films, but
Yeah.
Czech Philharmonic seemed like an interesting choice.
So this is a Brad Bird movie,
Mm-hmm.
one of his 4 animated movies at this point.
Right.
This was his first animated movie he's done.
Right, yeah, and I think we're probably going to eventually talk about all 4.
Eventually,
Hopefully.
yeah.
Eventually. I know a couple of them are on their short list to talk about soon. But yeah, so his first animated film and Michael Kamen's first animated film that he wrote a score for.
Yeah.
So kind of a film of firsts for some of the makers here.
Yeah. I like how Brad Bird deals with animation, because when he came into animation, he kind of changed things around a little bit.
Right.
Which he did also with 3D animation when Pixar got him in for Incredibles.
Right, yeah.
But he does a lot more, he tries to make animation a lot more like live action shooting with more dynamic camera movements.
Right, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, we definitely do see a lot of that, and I also feel like even with the animation, he caught a lot of the human emotions and characteristics of the face. Even in the robot, we have a lot of kind of humanistic mannerisms that are part of this animation. But like you said, most of the robot you were saying was not actually just like hand drawn animation, but a lot more CGI.
Yeah.
And I felt like I didn't even realize. I didn't even notice.
Yeah, I definitely didn't when I watched it as a kid.
Yeah.
I never noticed that.
Yeah, so I thought that was very interesting that it seemed very well done, whereas some other CGI seems kind of blaringly obvious.
Right. Yeah.
Standing out, different from the background or the rest of the animation. So I thought that was exceptionally well done.
Yeah, you really can see a lot of all the work that they all put into this, because also this movie has a lot more things done with the lighting than most animation movies.
Yeah.
Because you were pointing out something earlier about like when Hogarth was running through the forest with a flashlight.
Right, during the night.
Yeah, but and there are some smaller scenes where it's more subtle than that, but you should still see the lighting effects.
Yeah,
on the people.
Right, so like going to the forest, when we first see the town, I was blown away by how much detail there was in the color and the background art of this town, and how much of that was retained when Hogarth is searching with his flashlight gun and he's sweeping the flashlight around.
Yeah.
And we have kind of this dark grayscale, but everywhere the light's hitting, we're getting those flashes of that same bright fall oranges and reds color, which I thought was very, very interesting. And we see again a similar kind of thing later on in the film when Hogarth and Kent Mansley are fighting to stay awake to try and like keep an eye on each other, and we see kind of the lighting change as it's getting darker at night, and then going then into the morning. So we see some of that change there as well, that shift in lighting and color.
Yeah. I also found it interesting that Brad Bird chose to do this movie in Cinescope.
Mm-hmm.
The aspect ratio. I don't know how much you know about that.
Yeah, I know very little.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah, because like a normal TV is 16:9.
Right.
Aspect ratio, and then there's like IMAX, which is a little bit taller than that. But Cinescope is thinner. It has like the top and bottom has black bars, and it just comes across as a lot more cinematic and such.
Interesting.
And typically animated movies aren't done that way, but this one he chose to do in Cinemax.
Interesting.
Or Cinescope.
Cinescope, yeah. That is interesting, yeah. So I guess gives it more of that theatrical kind of look you were saying. So then looking at, decisions for that. So let's say what kind of experience, how would that change the experience for the audience, having the aspect ratio slightly changed? Would that change like the field of view, like how exactly things get framed, do you feel?
I think it's mostly just about how I think different aspect ratios kind of just have a different feel to them. Like Star Wars is also in Cinescope, and if it was shot in a larger format, it just wouldn't have the same epic feel to it. So I think,
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so like going to Star Wars, having that more kind of epic feel, so maybe having that different aspect ratio just subconsciously leads us towards a different kind of feeling if we're more used to 16:9 or 4:3, like you were saying.
Right.
It's possible. Yeah, interesting. Going to space and Star Wars and this epic kind of feel, the movie starts off with the camera looking at something flying through space. We see the Earth and we see these stars, and we have a very cool shot of this kind of like cloud weather pattern of the Earth and everything dealing there.
Yeah.
And then we see this thing flying through space and then entering into the atmosphere, which of course, you can then tell it's going to be the Iron Giant. But what an interesting way to start the movie, by focusing outside of the setting, outside of the Earth, and starting with kind of this alien kind of feel to it, where we're not yet on Earth, so we already start off feeling like we're these outside observers, and let's see how do we start into this story.
Although I think it also does a good job of setting, without not being strictly in the setting, it sets it up because you see Sputnik come by right away, so it sets up the time period, and a lot of that Cold War feeling is kind of throughout the movie, so I think it does set up a lot.
That's very true. Yeah, we do get that time frame of seeing Sputnik and knowing, okay, we're in this past era, this Cold War era. So if you've seen some of our other videos, we've talked about what does the time of writing the story, and how does the time that the movie is set, or the story is set, how does that impact the way the characters interact, and how does that describe kind of these ideas between the conflict and resolution?
Yeah, and this movie definitely deals a lot with the stuff going on around the Cold War. Yeah. Although I was kind of surprised this most recent viewing how a lot of the issues dealt with also felt very current as well. Yeah. Because like throughout the movie, the giant is being told about like guns and stuff, and Hogarth says that guns kill people, so they're bringing up like the gun safety that everyone's talking about today.
Right. Yeah, and understanding, they're not portraying guns necessarily in a completely negative light. They portray it in that using guns to kill, namely humans, presumably is going to be bad. But like they have the hunters shooting the deer, and that introduces that conflict of this was something that the Iron Giant connected with, and now it's dead, and so it being dead is not necessarily a bad thing. So, like, it's would be providing for these hunters' families. But this idea of killing is kind of a different aspect. So it's kind of an interesting topic to be able to try and build on, this idea of how do we talk about guns in such a way that we can describe death and life and what it means to live and how that's good versus bad. So looking at to kill is bad, but to die is okay. That's a natural thing.
Yeah, I like how it leads into that conversation between Hogarth and the giant.
Right.
And Hogarth start talking about how it's not good to kill, but it's okay to die, and
right.
That he starts talking about souls and souls don't die and all that. I like that whole conversation.
Yeah.
It's not something that you see a ton of in kids' movies.
Right. That's true. Yeah. Like, I feel like there's several movies, like even animated movies, that deal with this kind of concept sometimes of death, but they don't then go on to continue and look deeper into or discuss it. Like, Bambi's mother dies.
Yeah, they might go into more of loss, but not so much the death
exactly.
itself.
Right. So we have that loss as being something that triggers some kind of character growth or change in this person, but that's kind of where they focus. How does that affect the character more than what does that mean that this person or this character or whatever has died?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another issue that this movie dealt a lot with that also felt kind of current was it kind of had this, or some of the characters had this xenophobic nature about them, kind of being wary of other cultures. Just with the Cold War going on, they were just kind of assumed that anything foreign was out to get them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Kent Mansley, the FBI agent that shows up in this town to try and investigate this sighting of the Iron Giant, he says several times, we don't know what this thing is, we don't know where it came from, we don't know what it's trying to do or who sent it, what it's capable of. And so there's a lot that they don't know. And so his natural response then is one of kind of this fear response of, well, we need to just contain this thing and then destroy it, rather than actually try and figure out and learn about what it is and see, what is this thing. Let's, instead of trying to answer these questions, let's just get rid of it entirely.
Right.
Yeah. So definitely having that xenophobic, if we don't understand what this thing is, we're just gonna hate it or not touch it or not talk about it or not even try and think about how to understand this thing.
Yeah.
Another idea, going back to the souls, that kind of changed the way the second time that I've watched it now, when I was a kid versus now, there was this added scene where it goes into describing and showing a little bit more of what the Iron Giant is. Because I remember back as a kid, you never really learned very much about who or what the Iron Giant was or where it came from. But they have this added scene, this flashback scene, where he dreams, and that's kind of a weird thing for a robot to dream.
Yeah.
But then we learn that he's like created to be some kind of army weapon that destroys things.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that the other robots seem to just act a lot more robotic and move forward with their orders, but the titular character seems to look around and we see through his eyes the destruction that has been wrought, and it seems as if there's a little bit more to the Iron Giant than there is to maybe the other Iron Giants that we see in that dream sequence.
Which at the beginning of this movie, the giant does seem a lot more robotic in everything that he does. Yeah. It's only after he gets that bump on his head and he sees Hogarth save him.
Yeah.
Because if he's here on the planet to cause destruction, he sees that one of the creatures that he would be causing destruction to, it actually helps him.
So yeah. So realizing something there. That there's definitely some kind of change in that character, very likely through that bump in the head, which later on in the film we see becomes undone when he flips out near the end of the movie.
Yeah. Huh.
Is my coffee mug in frame?
Already started.
Was it?
Yeah.
No.
I think you can hit the button on the back and it starts it, but sometimes it just wakes it up. So
Gotcha. I don't remember where we left off, but I guess that's fine.
yeah, it was kind of related to the "You Are Who You Choose to Be." You remember that?
Yeah. I think we were talking about. The deleted scene. So I think it was like talking about like the giant acting as a weapon. But anyway. So one of the central themes and central mantras of the movie is this line that Hogarth tells to the Iron Giant when they're talking about guns and death and killing, and Hogarth tells the Iron Giant, "You are who you choose to be." So we have these reasons to see the Iron Giant as this destructive, kind of bad force, but after meeting Hogarth and seeing what he's done for the Iron Giant chooses not to be that way.
Yeah.
So it kind of gets us into a discussion of what does that exactly mean, that you are who you choose to be? What kind of choices do we make in our day-to-day lives, or even in long-term kind of choices, and how do those define and create an identity for who we are? It's kind of an interesting question to dive into.
I always like taking those sort of central themes that are kind of given to the main character and looking at what they mean for the antagonist.
Yeah.
So like for Kent Mansley, what would that mean? Where his decisions kind of lead him to be more xenophobic and looking out for himself, where he even runs over, because like throughout the most of the movie he's doing things that are for the good of the country, but then at the end he when the general says we're going to stay here and die for our country, decides to just leave,
to flee. He tries to escape. And so we see that even in the beginning of the movie, when we first see him, he comes across as having this air of authority about him, and he's some kind of federal agent, and he's here to investigate and find out the truth of the matter. But we very quickly realize he's been sent on this mission that maybe the people who are above him believe there not really to be anything going on here. The general at first says, this is kind of hogwash. Bring me some actual evidence, a picture or something, and then maybe we can see what's happening. So it's almost kind of like what happened before this movie that's gotten Mansley into this position where he's kind of been demoted into a space where he has these ambitions and this kind of pride about him, but he is not in a position to be able to utilize what he believes to be his strengths. So he ends up coming across as kind of bumbling and kind of a kind of useless character at the start, but then very quickly goes into a darker kind of side of him. Once he realizes that there actually is something here, and he sees that as an opportunity to grab power. So his choices, he's trying to regain that power, but does it in a way that ends up harming not just Hogarth and the Iron Giant, but this entire town goes through a pretty traumatic experience.
Yeah. So the first time that line is used, the "you are who you choose to be," it's actually Dean saying it to Hogarth.
That's true. Yeah, that's right.
Back after Dean gives him coffee.
That's right. Yeah, Dean.
Because Hogarth goes on this long spiel about being moved up a grade.
Right.
And now he's being bullied because he wasn't being stimulated enough.
Yeah, like he's too smart, but he's not really smart. He's just doing the work.
Yeah.
Why don't you just do your homework? Just do the work, and you're gonna get good grades too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
and you kind of see throughout the movie that that's kind of a lot of the other kids do kind of ignore him at most or bully him. Mm-hmm. But I do like in the last scene, you see Dean and his mom together, but then you also see him playing with some of the other kids that had been kind of dismissing him throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, yeah. So we see Dean as a very nice father figure for Hogarth, both there at the end of the movie and also earlier in the movie when he's trying to console Hogarth in this situation, the scenario that Hogarth finds himself in, trying to provide some kind of sustenance maybe for this giant and also some place to hide it.
Yeah.
So this beatnik, scrapper, artist kind of person says, fine, you can keep him here, and listens to his tale. Going on to Hogarth's father, we don't really get much information about.
Yeah, he's never really mentioned
Hogarth's father, right? I think the only reference that I can recall is the picture frame next to his clock, Hogarth's clock in his bedroom, and you see this man standing next to this plane, and so it leads me to believe maybe World War II, late after that time, early Cold War. I mean, I don't know if there were very many active pilots. I mean, maybe like it looked more like a fighter pilot, but hard to say from the image.
Yeah, well, it was 52 when the movie
That's
took
true.
that place. So
if he was 9,
like,
so that would put him being
like
born.
The end of the they could have fought at the end of like the Japanese side or the Pacific side of World War
true.
II.
Yeah, and there was definitely a lot of aircraft there. So yeah, that's definitely a possibility. And we see Hogarth acting in such a way that he has that kind of same desires to fly and act as a pilot. He's got the pilot's helmet and the goggles. He asks the Iron Giant to spin him around super quick in that beat up car, and he acts as if he's switching on the ignitions and all these switches and turn these knobs and lifting off, taking off.
Yeah.
So we see the influence that his father had on him, even if we know practically nothing about him as a character, as a person.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like kind of how the movie handles the character of Hogarth with like him pretending to be a pilot there.
Yeah.
Because it has a lot of this moments where it really just shows him being a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like when they go to the lake, and he just kind of says, "This move is for professionals only." Like that's just something that you really would hear a kid say.
Only a kid would say that.
Yeah,
exactly. And then just jumps right in, and again another kid thing to say. Come on in. The water's great. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And like clearly not. It's Maine in the fall. I don't know if they say the exact time, but yeah, it's clearly not swimming weather. So yeah, we definitely see him acting like a 9-year-old would act.
Yeah.
I even read the director Brad Bird would have Eli run around to try and get out of breath during certain scenes, so it was a little bit more realistic that he could get into the character and
Yeah.
have that kind of breathless energy of having just like run around somewhere.
Yeah, I heard that he did the same thing with the voice actor for Dash and The Incredibles.
Right. Yeah. So it's very interesting that seems like something that you might not really think about watching it, but it makes the character so much more real. Of course they're going to be, out of breath, worn out a little bit.
Yeah.
From doing whatever activities they've been doing. So it's a small little thing that builds such a realism to the movie.
Yeah, another way that he's really shows him as a kid is his comic book collection.
Right.
He shows the giant.
Mm-hmm.
He has a lot of like the spirit, and
Right.
he really seems to enjoy Superman.
Superman, yeah, and we see both Superman and then the villain Atomo in one of the other comic books.
Yeah.
And even the image on the front cover of Atomo is somewhat based off of what we see of the Iron Giant. So of course the Iron Giant connects to that and says, "Oh, here's another robot." But Hogarth says, "No, even if that's what you look like, that's the villain. You're not the villain. You're the good guy."
Yeah, he doesn't see the visual similarities. He sees that the similarities with Superman, both being from outer space, crash landing on the planet.
On the planet, yeah.
Yeah.
So again, going to this idea of identity and who we choose to be, and even with the xenophobia, we have to look beyond just this physical, right? Like we can't just look at this robot and see, oh, well, yeah, that looks like a Tomo. Tomo's a villain, so this robot must be a villain and evil and destructive and wants to kill all of us, even if that might be true based on what we might or might not know about these robots. But again, it's if you're choosing who to be, the robot, as Hogarth has known him, is choosing to be more like superhero, helping the people, and even though has come from another planet and is alien, is not going into this kind of destructive nature. Once Hogarth has told him, how to try and repair things, like we see, just kind of naturally, the Iron Giant wants to feed on metal, so of course grabs the train tracks and wants to eat the train tracks.
Yeah.
And then Hogarth tells him, "No, we gotta put it back. The train's coming." And the Iron Giant decides, "Well, I need to fix it, but I need to fix it perfectly." So getting the train tracks to match perfectly, which ends up leading to some issues for the Iron Giant and the destruction a little bit of the Iron Giant. We see pieces of it kind of fly about.
Yeah.
Which leads to another interesting characterization and development within the story. We see the kind of like a rebirth, but not necessarily a rebirth. Like this, the robot's able to repair himself.
Yeah.
So it leads to, when we get to the end of the movie and we see the destruction of the robot, our first thoughts aren't, "Oh, yeah, well, I mean, he's fine, he can repair himself." It's, "Oh my goodness, that explosion's so huge, there's no way anything could have survived that."
The whole movie had been kind of setting up atomic destruction as this big thing. So
this nuclear holocaust kind of,
yeah,
this kind of fear-mongering kind of setting. So of course, as the audience, we're led to believe he's destroyed, but we see there at the end that somehow all the way in Iceland he's fallen back from space and landed in the snow of some kind of mountain or volcano of Iceland, and slowly but surely beginning to repair itself. Going to the nuclear holocaust, I thought there was a very interesting point in the film where we see a little bit of that kind of symbolism. I don't know whether this was intentional or not, but when Hogarth and Dean are trying to get to the robot and try and rescue it, as the military are learning more and more about it and realize that it's actually there, we see that it goes from this normal kind of bright sunny fall day to very quickly there's snowfall, and it's almost like a blizzard. So my mind went straight to, kind of like, this is like ash and destruction, symbolic of in the tone of the movie shifting to, we're having this conflict come to a head where we might not be able to save this robot. What are we going to do? We have to go and chase him down, to this even symbolic of the setting where we have this nuclear kind of holocaust and this snow blizzard being able to restrict and constrict the protagonist's abilities.
Yeah, the snow starts like right after Dean tells him that he's a walking gun, basically. Right. So it's kind of following the giant's emotions of him starting to believe that he is a gun.
And yeah. Because that's kind of what, if he's remembering through that dream sequence, he's remembering those little bits and pieces of, maybe that is who I am. That's who I'm supposed to be.
Right.
Can I truly believe this ideal of I can choose to be something else? So, an interesting kind of change there, where there's that instinctive response, that kind of almost human response to danger, let me attack and defend, that then from Dean's point of view, his perspective is initially, he's attacking Hogarth, he's attacking the kid. And it's not till later that we realize, both as the audience and also as within the characters, that it is that defensive kind of thing.
Yeah. Which,
again, whether that's what he was initially created for, it's hard to tell from the dream sequence. It almost portrays it as if they're these attack robots, but from what we've seen the Iron Giant do, it had all been in defense until Hogarth is supposedly killed. Appears to
and
be
even then,
killed.
he is still being shot at, so it is still kind
defensive.
of defensive.
Yeah, it's true. So he's responding in anger to Hogarth's death, but it's in defense. It's in response to these military actions as well. Yeah.
So this movie, like I said, it introduces the character of Superman, kind of gives some similarities between the Giant and the character of Kal-El. And I've heard people say that this movie is kind of a superhero story, which I think is an interesting way to look at it.
That's true. Yeah, it is kind of like a superhero movie where, in several scenes, the Iron Giant imagines himself as Superman as he flies around with Hogarth, and even at the end of the movie, trying to stop this nuclear bomb from dropping on this small town of Rockwell, Maine.
So there's a lot of lines in this movie that are repeated.
Yeah.
The "You Stay, I Go" is repeated from Hogarth first tells the Giant, and the Giant repeats it back, and then the "You Are Who You Choose to Be," Dean says that to Hogarth, and then Hogarth says it to the Giant at the end of the movie.
Right, that's true.
And then "Guns Kill" keeps coming back.
Right.
And all that implies is something that Kent Mansley says multiple times throughout the movie, and Hogarth kind of throws it back at one point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's such an interesting storytelling aspect to utilize several things. Like even like when it comes like themes, repetition is something that's key. You have to talk about this in several different ways and several different times. So it's an important thing to do. But then also like even and all that implies there's not really much to that line. It's just kind of this quirk that Mansley says and uses.
Although I do kind of see it as him kind of not thinking through everything. Like he's just kind of, he's afraid of the enemy and he just wants to get rid of them. He's not really thinking through what that implies. He just kind
of just says, of course, all that implies.
Exactly.
Without thinking through, well, what does that imply actually? So, yeah. So we do see that. And then Hogarth's use of it is when Mansley's being kicked out of Rockwell, the army and the military are saying, we're going back to Washington. You're going to be sitting at a desk. You're going to be court-martialed or whatever it was that the general told him.
Yeah.
And so he Hogarth replies, goodbye to Kent Mansley, and all that implies. So, we see that kind of repetition. Very, very interesting.
And one last line that I found interesting was at the very end when, right before the giant leaves to stop the nuke, Hogarth says, "I love you" to the giant, which is interesting. You don't see a lot of movies kind of have that sort of friendship type of love being expressed.
Yeah, that's true. Of course, the Iron Giant responds with, "I know." No, not really. But yeah, that's a good point. That we a lot of times, of course, we see characters grow and interact throughout different movies and plots and stories, but kind of like the innocence of a child, this 9-year-old kid to be able to very openly and just kind of naturally just respond to I love you. It's such an interesting thing to see Hogarth respond in such a way to the Iron Giant being there for them to save them in that last kind of moment, and then the Iron Giant again repeats that line, "You stay, I go, no follow."
Yeah.
So, and then ending with that self-sacrifice. So, we are going to be introducing a new set of videos that we're going to be uploading.
Yes, usually we only upload on the first and third Tuesdays of each month, but on months when there's going to be a fifth Tuesday, we've thought it would be interesting to do videos like we've been doing, but with a wider variety of topics.
Right, so we're going to be doing some R-rated movies, like Blade Runner, Shawshank Redemption, going to do some TV shows potentially.
Yeah.
So some things new, some things different.
Yeah, this month we're planning on doing, on the fifth Tuesday, reviewing Blade Runner 2049.
Mm-hmm.
So stay tuned for that, and then we will get back to our regular
scheduled program. All right, thank you.
That will do it for this video. We'd like to thank Mill Eastup for creating our theme.
And join us in the comments section below to go over any questions or add to the discussion on the Iron Giant.
And subscribe so you don't miss our next video where we'll discuss Spider-Man.
Thanks for watching. This has been FoxTales Movie Club. I'm Tony Sherman.
And I'm Fox, and we'll see you in the next video.